Welcome back. Thanks very much. I hope you enjoyed the coffee break. I was quite fascinated by that honey contraption. Did you see that? Where the gravity-fed honey. It's fantastic stuff. Okay, so I have the great pleasure of introducing myself this time. And I'll be talking about the customer experience from a slightly different perspective. So I run a consulting firm that specializes in the nexus between sales and marketing, and we help organizations, sales and marketing teams to work together more effectively. And the way that impacts is through the buyer's journey, and I'll be talking a bit about that in a minute. At the end of the presentation, I'll make you a special offer, and I'll also be talking about my book launch, which happens after the conference this afternoon out here. There'll be champagne, right? So, and you're all invited. Okay, so let's start. Now, we've all heard of the sales cycle, haven't we? Who's not heard of the sales cycle? Okay, so there's one slide I didn't need. And it's basically where in the olden days, the sales rep was mostly in charge of progressing through the sales cycle, where they said, you know, here's a suspect, we'll turn them into a prospect, and we'll turn them into a customer, and then we keep them and repeat it. And that was the sales cycle. What increasingly happens nowadays is the so-called buyer's journey, and this is where we go online. We inform ourselves about what options we have, what price we should pay, and who can give us the best solution. And you can see here that by the time you actually contact a vendor, you've pretty much gone through a decision-making process of what you want, and depending on whose statistic you believe, between 60 and 90% of your decision-making is already completed by the time you contact a sales rep. Now, from a sales rep's perspective, that's a disaster, right? Because I can't sell you the thing that I get the most commission for, or the thing that my company wants me to sell to you. I can't cross-sell, I can't upsell, I'm stuck, and I'm basically relegated to giving you the best price because you have 3 others that you can buy the same thing from as well, right? So the buyer's journey is upon us, and it's the customer that's now in charge in terms of who they buy from, what they buy, and how much they buy it for. What does that look like from the inside of the organization, though? Right? Inside the organization, it looks like we've got all this technology. I'll do the same again here. We've got all this technology to help make ourselves attractive to the buyer while they're going through the research phase in the buyer's journey, right? So I'm not waiting for you to make up your mind and shortlist me down to your bottom 2 or 3, or your top 2 or 3. I'm trying to get your attention while you're still in your research phase, because I want you to come and spot me before you spot my competitors, and I want you to be most interested in my office, right? So we've got all these wonderful acronyms here that we implement as technology to make ourselves visible and attractive to the buyer while they're still going through the research phase in the buyer's journey. And that can be very complicated. I think Dory will agree with me. That can be very complicated. And we've got often different systems that came in at different times in the life of the organization, and they don't necessarily talk to each other, and it's pretty hard to get them all on the same page. So how does that manifest itself in the corporate world? And in this context, forgive me if I speak mainly about B2B, business to business. And here's a statistic that was put out by the Fornays Group last year. And it was basically asking the CEOs, how happy are you with your marketers? And the result was pretty damning for the marketers in the sense that, over 70% of CEOs said they were not very happy with their marketers. Right? Personally, I think it's slightly unfair, because if you look at what the expectations actually were, they're all fairly short-term, and they're fairly revenue-oriented. Right? Personally, I think in marketing, marketing has more to contribute to an organization than sales leads and and campaigns, there is the brand imaging, brand recognition. There's thought leadership, expertise, and when we talk about the buyer's journey, we need to bring that expertise and that thought leadership to the forefront, because we want you to see as a buyer that we have that expertise that you need to make a decision and to buy. Right? So just focusing on the leads alone is a bit unfair in my book, but hey, I didn't make that survey. But it just says that there's a big disconnect between the top leadership and the marketers when it comes to the buyer's journey. Now, we did some research into this last year, and we released a report in May of 2014. We're currently working on the May 2015 report, so it'll come out in a couple of months. And we looked into 185 B2B organizations. And we looked at what do the successful ones, so the ones whose revenue grew over the preceding 12 months, do differently in terms of their sales and marketing alignment compared to the ones where the revenue didn't grow. And the findings were very interesting, and there's a 30-page report that's downloadable for free from the website. I'll only take you through 28 of those 30 pages. No, I won't. And the key finding was that there's a direct correlation between your alignment between sales and marketing and the financial success of the organization. So in other words, the more aligned your sales and marketing teams were and the more that they actually collaborated and worked together, the more successful the organization from a financial perspective. All right? And not only that, I'm giving away a bit of a key finding of the 2015 report now, and that is that the ratio between successful organizations having their sales and marketing aligned and those that didn't was 2 to 1, almost. Right? So that means if your sales and marketing teams are well aligned and working well together, collaborating, you're twice as likely to be financially successful than otherwise. Right? Twice as likely, not just 10% or 20%, twice as likely. It's a big number, and it was a pleasing but very surprising result for us as well. Now the nexus of sales and marketing and the opportunity for improvement in that nexus has been around for a long time. So you'll see there's a Gartner paper here from 2007. Does it say 2007? Yep. And they were already saying, sales and marketing collaboration makes a lot of sense then. And there's a whole white paper by Gartner out there. The other one that I want to point out is this one that comes from the Harvard Business Review. And there are 3 very eminent people who wrote the white paper, and one of them is Neil Rackham. Now, who doesn't know who Neil Rackham is? Okay, so Neil Rackham was kind of the forefather of structured selling. He invented the spin selling process, which he researched basically, and this is really what I like about Neil, is that he used research principles to actually look into the sales process of successful organizations. And he did a lot of work with the likes of Xerox Corporation and so on. And he looked at what makes successful salespeople different to less successful salespeople. And from that, then he developed the spin selling methodology. So he's kind of the forefather of solution selling. And he's one of the co-authors of this paper. And look what it's titled. It doesn't say the disconnect or the gap or the dysfunction. It says the war between sales and marketing, right? And there's hardly a stronger term that you can use for a relationship or lack thereof, than a war. And so it is a real problem. And it's not just me saying that. There's some eminent people talking about that. So I won't read these out, but here's what we've seen marketing people saying about sales. Are there any marketers in the room? You would never say that about sales, would you? And let's be fair, the flip side is this is what salespeople say about marketers, by and large. All right. So can you see where the disconnect is? All right. Now imagine if you're a buyer along the buyer's journey and you've done your research and you've been attracted by the messaging that marketing put out, and you believe that we're a thought leader in the space that you're looking at, and you go, okay, these guys really know what they're doing. I better go and contact one of their reps. Right? If now I contact the rep and the rep goes and tells me something different to what I saw online, there's an instant disconnect there, and there's an instant loss of credibility for the buyer, right? Because they go, this guy's telling me something different to what I read online, and I have a choice of going to 2 or 3 other vendors, and I probably will if that happens to me. So it used to be that there was a problem between sales and marketing created stuff that sales never used, and sales started doing marketing because they couldn't rely on their own marketing team. But that problem is now accelerated by the fact that the buyer's journey is here, and if you don't have your sales and marketing messaging 100% aligned, it's not about lack of productivity, it's actually about lack of revenue. Right? So it's become much more serious and much more wide-ranging in impact on the vendors. So that's then borne out. CSR Insights last year published a paper about what are your intentions for 2014, and second highest only to more leads was actually aligning sales and marketing. So it's a big mainstream thing that sales and marketing need to be aligned in order to synchronize the different touch points that the buyer has through the buyer's journey, and therefore to enhance the customer experience. So the approach that we take, I said we're a consultant in this space, and the approach that we take is quite different from the traditional ways. And if who's got a CRM? Who's got a CRM? All right. Who loves their CRM? Oh, I'll talk to you later. Okay, so the usual thing is that, sorry, I have to be careful now that I've got some happy people in the room. What we see a lot happen is that CRM vendors come and talk about the benefits of the software. They get the executive excited. They approve the funding, and then hand it over to the IT team to implement. Right? You know what's coming, right? So at that point, the whole paradigm changes, because the IT team is not rewarded against delivery of business benefits from the software. The IT team is rewarded against installation on time and on budget, right? So it becomes let's get that thing in as quickly as possible so we can tick that box, right? And guess what happens to the people, to the users, right? And then you find that the organization is a bit surprised when the utilization rates don't go up or don't reach the levels that they were projected as, because people just simply hate something that's being imposed on them and they never had a say in. Right? So that was a bit of a long-winded explanation to say why we start off with the people dimension. Right? So in the particular context of sales and marketing, we want sales and marketing to agree that they want to work together in the first place. What's in it for me if I do that? Right? Once they have agreed that they work together, we can then work on how do we work together. So we're talking now about the processes and the metrics that sit behind that. Right? And then once we've agreed on that we want to work together, and how we want to work together, then we can look at what technologies can we use to actually support that and make it sustainable. Right? Because if you don't, 6 or 12 months later, we'll be back to square one. Right? So that's why we have this, what we call the productivity trinity. Productivity trinity of people, processes, and then technology in that order of sequence. And we've actually come in and rescued a few CRM and marketing automation instances as well, where it just started off with the technology and then nobody ended up using it, and it costs a lot of money for a white elephant. Right? So what we want to do is we want to break down a barrier here. So we've got sales talking to the market, and we've got marketing talking to the market, and as I said earlier today, we want them to say the same thing. And the only way you get them to say the same thing is if they actually talk to each other. Right? So we want to create a 360-degree virtuous cycle there between sales, marketing, and your customers, so that the experience that the customer has is seamless. And then we can go beyond that, and we can create a kind of a yin and yang relationship between sales and marketing, and one of our clients called it something different. They said sales and marketing should be like two ends of the same banana, which is much more floral than yin and yang, isn't it? So we've adopted the term marketing. So it's sales and marketing together as one. And the question is, in this room, in your organizations, how well do you practice marketing today? So can I just have a show of hands for seamlessly? You're very happy with your sales and marketing interactions. 1, 2, 3. Excellent. So, okay. And the rest. Okay. So you can see there's a wide divergent range of quality of interaction between sales and marketing, and if you are interested in providing a seamless experience to your buyers, then you really need to have those two aligned and singing from the same hymn sheet. Now, there are certain expectations that a buyer might have, and so here's a typical buyer. And we're saying, what expectations do you have? And I won't read these out to you because you can read them more quickly than I can read them to you. But basically, I have some certain expectations that I expect you as a vendor to offer to me as part of my customer experience. But if you remember back to the picture where we had all the technology, that's pretty hard to actually implement. Right? And it gets particularly hard the larger the organization gets, and so we had the example of Telstra earlier, and we'll talk about Optus later. It sounds easy to do, and you heard the statistic that 80% of CEOs think that they're providing a superior service, but only 8% of the clients agree. So it's damn hard to do that. And so here is one example of how you could address it. Okay. Can everybody read this? Is it too small in the back row? Can you read it? Okay. So what we've done here is we've said, okay, here are the customer's expectations. Here are the business units that touch those customers. And in here it says people, process, and technology. So it basically says, for example, in sales, what do the people need to do? What process do we need to have in place? And what technologies do we need to underpin that in order to deliver this experience to the client from the sales perspective? And then you do the same thing down marketing and the back office operations and service delivery and so on. And you see it becomes a pretty complex picture, right? Especially when you make it times 3 with the people, process, and technology. And that's why I'm saying this CX stuff is actually pretty hard, right? It gets very complicated when you try to automate it or when you try to systematize it. And you can spend a lot of time in an area here where sales are getting it right, and then the service people will screw it up, or vice versa. And from a customer's perspective, I just see the brand, right? I don't see Peter Strohkorb Consulting sales and then Peter Strohkorb Consulting service delivery. To me, it's all Peter Strohkorb Consulting, right? So I don't really care what goes on behind the scenes. I just want my experience. And so here's one example of how you could address it from a high-level perspective, and then push a whole bunch of whiteboards together and with sticky notes and go through the process. Now, what's in it for you if you do it? All right. So here is a sample calculation of an organization that's going to do different things in terms of its sales numbers. So as a base case, we have an organization that sells something for $100 and it makes $10 on it. Yep, so far so good? Okay. What I'm going to show you on the next slide is what would happen if we improved the productivity of the salespeople by just 5%. What would happen if we reduced the cost of selling by 5%? And what would happen if we increase prices by just 5%? So it's all baselined at 5%, and we'll see what happens here. All right. So So we reduced the direct selling expense by 5%, which means we're still selling it for $100, but we're saving a bit of money down here, right? So all those, who are the sales reps in the room? BDMs, account managers, all right. So when your sales manager hounds you and says you spend too much on taking this client out for lunch, it's actually not going to make that much difference to the bottom line. You can tell them that. Tell them I said so. But if I can help you to improve your sales productivity by just 5%, look what happens to the bottom line. Right? So if just the 5% gives in productivity gives you a 20% improvement in profitability. So it's a 4 times profit lever. Right? Now, the reason that your CFOs always go on about the margin and raise your prices is that it's actually a stronger lever even again, right? So you can see just by lifting the price by 5%, you actually get a 50% improvement in the gross profit. But in today's hyper competitive world, it's not always realistic to raise your prices, but it is realistic to increase your productivity in terms of selling. So by sales working more effectively and more closely with marketing can focus on what they do best, and sales can focus on what they do best, and everybody wins, if only they talk to each other, right? And that's the service that we provide. We get them together and we get them to agree to work together and work out how they work together. So here's a Chinese saying that I picked up online and I really like the idea of. And that's kind of a customer experience statement as well, isn't it? Okay, so I promised there was going to be a special offer, and the special offer is that if you're interested in your sales and marketing collaboration status today, like how well do my sales and marketing teams collaborate today, just text that number with your name, and we'll contact you and we'll give you a free assessment. All right. And I've also handed out these little thingies that help you get in touch as well. Okay. Now the book. So as I mentioned, there'll be champagne. After 5:30 today, out here, we're going to have a book launch, and I'll be selling copies of my book, and you can come and talk to me and have a look at what it's all about. And it's basically just describing the need for why you would do it and what's in it for you, and how we roll out the one team method to help sales and marketing teams to work more effectively together. Right? So it's a pretty good read. It's got about 300 pages, about 54,000 words, and I hope that you will enjoy it. So that's it from me. Thank you very much. And I'll now introduce the next speaker. Martin.